Some men get a call that ends everything in a single sentence. I got a text message that ended nothing, it just left me hanging there for 11 days, and that silence did more damage to me than any bad news ever could have. You want to know what it feels like to build a life around two people and then watch them erase you from it without a single raised voice? Let me tell you. It feels like standing in your own garage at 6 in the morning, staring at a phone screen that refuses to light up, wondering if the daughter you raised is even still speaking to people who love her. That was me. 63 years old, still strong enough to carry a transmission across a shop floor by myself, and still soft enough that a silent phone could bring me to my knees. My name is Walter Briggs. For 38 years, I've run Briggs, Diesel, and Fleet out of a stretch of road just outside Tulsa, Oklahoma, the kind of shop that keeps 18-wheelers and school buses and county utility trucks running when everybody else has given up on them. I didn't inherit a wrench or a dollar from anybody. My own mother raised 4 of us alone, on a waitress's tips after my father drank himself out of our lives before I turned 9. I used to sit on the curb outside the diner where she worked, waiting for her shift to end, promising myself that if I ever had children, they would never once know what it felt like to wait on a curb for somebody. I kept that promise for 31 years. And then, on a Wednesday in early June, it came apart in 11 days that I will never get back. Welcome to the channel, by the way. If you're new here, I tell true stories my own, and the ones friends have trusted me with. Stories about families, about the debts we owe each other that never show up on paper. Hit that like button, tell me where you're tuning in from tonight, and settle in, because this one still sits heavy in my chest even now. It started with a phone call I never got. My daughter Renee had a due date. Her second child, a boy this time, due the second week of June. I'd known that date for months, the way you know your own birthday, circled on the calendar hanging in my shop office, right next to the parts inventory sheet. Renee lives 40 minutes away in Broken Arrow with her husband Cole, and every single week for the last 4 months I'd driven over on Sunday afternoons to help Cole finish out the nursery, hang the drywall, run the extra outlet for the sound machine. I wasn't just the father-in-law who shows up for holidays. I was the man with the tape measure and the level, standing in that half-finished room every week, making sure my grandson would come home to something solid. The due date came and went. I told myself that was normal. First babies are late, second babies can be too. I didn't want to be the father who calls too much, so I waited. 2 days after the due date, I sent a text. Nothing dramatic, nothing worried, just, "Thinking about you both today. Any news, sweetheart?" No reply. I told myself she was tired. 9 months pregnant and exhausted, who wants to be typing texts back to her father? I let it sit a full day before I tried again. Just checking in. Love you. Still nothing. By the 4th day past the due date, I called instead of texting. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I left a message, keeping my voice light the way you do when you don't want the fear in it to leak through. "Hey, sweetheart, it's Dad. Just want to know you're okay. Give me a call whenever." That night at dinner, my wife Doris set down her fork and looked at me the way she's looked at me for 35 years whenever I'm carrying something I haven't said out loud yet. "You've barely touched your pork chop," she said. "What is it?" "Renee's not answering," I said. 4 days now. Nothing. Doris waved it off the way I wanted her to. "She just had a baby, Walter, or she's about to. She's got her hands full." She was right. Of course she was right. So why did I feel something cold pooling low in my stomach every time I looked at that phone? By day 7, it had stopped being annoying and started being something else entirely. I called Cole directly, my son-in-law, a good man, quiet, the kind who fixes things with his hands the same way I do. Straight to voicemail, too. I called the hospital in Broken Arrow, the one Renee had picked months ago, and a nurse who couldn't give me details confirmed only that yes, a Renee Whitfield had delivered a healthy baby boy 5 days earlier. Mother and baby both released and doing fine. Released, doing fine, and not one word to me. I hung up that phone and sat in my truck in the shop parking lot for a long time, engine off, hands still on the wheel like I was driving somewhere. My granddaughter, Renee's first, is 4 years old. She calls me Pop Pop. She calls my phone herself, sometimes just to tell me about a butterfly she saw. And now there was a brand new grandson out there in the world, 5 days old, and I didn't even know his name. By day 9, I'd called 11 times combined between Renee and Cole. Not one call answered, not one text returned. I stopped sleeping through the night. Doris found me twice at 3 in the morning, sitting at the kitchen table with the phone face up in front of me, like it might ring just because I was watching it hard enough. Something's wrong, I told her on the 9th night. This isn't busy, Doris. This isn't new baby exhaustion. This is somebody deciding not to answer. She didn't argue with me that time. That's the thing about 35 years of marriage. You learn to recognize the exact moment your spouse stops trying to talk you down because some part of them has started climbing the same ledge you're standing on. Pack a bag, I said. We're driving over there tomorrow. I need to see my daughter's face. We didn't call ahead. Some part of me, the part that had spent 9 sleepless nights inventing every disaster a father's mind can build at 3 in the morning, didn't trust a phone call to get an honest answer anymore. Doris sat quiet in the passenger seat the whole 40 minutes to Broken Arrow, hands folded in her lap, watching the flat Oklahoma fields roll by like she was looking for an answer written out there in the wheat. Maybe there's a simple explanation, she said, about 10 minutes out. Maybe the new baby has them so turned around they just haven't thought about calling anyone. Then why would Cole not answer either? I said, gripping the wheel tighter than I needed to on a straight 2-lane road. 11 calls, Doris. 11 days, not one text back, not a single word. She didn't have an answer for that. I think some part of her already knew, the way some part of me already knew, that whatever waited at that house wasn't going to be a simple explanation. Their house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, a modest brick 2-story that Cole and Renee had bought 3 years back and that I'd helped repaint the shutters on myself last spring. 2 cars in the driveway. Balloons, actual silver balloons, the kind that spell out letters tied to the mailbox post, bobbing gently in the June wind. My chest went tight looking at them. Somebody was celebrating something. Please, God, let it just be the baby. I parked at the curb instead of pulling into the driveway, some instinct telling me not to assume I still belonged in that driveway. We walked up together, Doris a half step behind me, and I knocked. I heard voices inside. Laughter. A woman's voice I didn't recognize, bright and easy. Footsteps. The door opened, and there stood my daughter, thinner than I'd ever seen her outside of pregnancy, holding a mug of coffee, wearing a soft gray t-shirt that said Big Sister across the front. Must have been a gift for my granddaughter. For half a second, just half a second, relief flooded through me so hard my knees nearly buckled. She's alive. She's okay. Thank God. Then I saw her face fully register who was standing on her porch, and that relief curdled into something else entirely. It was the exact look she used to give me as a teenager when I caught her sneaking back in after curfew caught and calculating how much trouble she was actually in. "What are you guys doing here?" she said. Not Dad, not Mom, not "How did you know?" Not even "Come meet your grandson." Just "What are you doing here?" The way you'd say it to someone who showed up uninvited to interrupt something. I tried to keep my voice steady, even though my whole chest felt like it was folding in on itself. "I've been calling for 11 days. Renee. Your mother and I didn't know if you were alive. I called the hospital, just to find out you'd had the baby." Renee's jaw tightened, and she glanced back over her shoulder into the house before she looked at me again. "We didn't answer because we didn't want to deal with this right now," she said, flat, final. "We have a new baby, Dad. We need space to figure out our own family without you and Mom hovering over every single thing we do. Just give us room. Stop checking in every 5 minutes like we're children." Every 5 minutes. 11 days of silence, and she called it every 5 minutes. I've taken a lot of hits in 63 years. A transmission jack that slipped once and nearly took my kneecap with it. My own father walking out the door when I was 8 and never once looking back. None of it landed the way those words landed, standing on a porch I'd repainted with my own hands, listening to my daughter tell me I was hovering. Before I could find anything to say, Cole appeared behind her in the doorway, and behind him I could see the woman whose voice I'd heard, Cole's sister, it turned out later, visiting from out of state, holding a glass of sparkling something. Cole didn't look angry. He looked exhausted, and a little embarrassed. The way a man looks when he knows the argument playing out in front of him isn't one he can win either direction. "Walt," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "It's just we've got a lot going on. This isn't the best time." "I understand a new baby is a lot," I said, and I meant it. I tried so hard to keep the hurt out of my voice and just speak plainly. But 11 days, son. Your mother-in-law thought Renee might be lying in a hospital bed somewhere and nobody had told us. That's not privacy. That's not space. That's letting two people who love you suffer for no reason at all. Renee's face went hard in a way I'd never seen it go, not once in 28 years of raising her. "You don't get to make this about your feelings," she said. "You and Mom have always done this, showing up, inserting yourselves, acting like we owe you constant updates because you helped build a nursery. We didn't ask you to build the nursery, Dad." I felt that one land somewhere under my ribs. 12 Sundays. 12 Sunday afternoons with a tape measure and a level. 12 Sundays I could have spent fishing or resting my back, and she stood there telling me nobody asked me to. Cole's sister spoke up then, arms crossed, that same bright, easy voice gone brittle. "Honestly, we were just starting to enjoy some peace around here," she said. "Do you guys always just show up like this?" Doris, standing beside me, finally found her voice, and it came out smaller than I'd ever heard it. "I'm sorry, who are you?" "I'm Cole's sister, Marissa," the woman said, with a little laugh that had no warmth in it at all. "I flew in to help with the baby since, apparently that's needed around here. Some of us know how to help without making it about ourselves." I watched something break behind Doris's eyes at that. 35 years of marriage, and I had never once seen my wife look the way she looked in that doorway, like a stranger had reached into her chest and closed a fist around something soft. "Can we at least meet him?" Doris asked, barely above a whisper. "Please, just for a minute." Renee hesitated. For one second I thought some piece of her might still be in there. The little girl who used to run to the door every single day I came home from the shop covered in grease, arms out, calling me daddy before I even got my boots off. Then Cole's sister shifted her weight, and Renee's face closed back up. "Now's not a good time," Renee said. "He's sleeping. We'll bring him by when things settle down." "When?" I said quietly. "Not if. Dad, please don't do this." "Do what?" Renee asked. "To meet my own grandson?" She looked past me then, toward the street, toward our truck parked at the curb, like she was already tired of the whole conversation before it had properly started. "You need to go," she said. "We'll call you. Just stop calling us for a while. Stop showing up. Let us live our own life for once." I want to pause right here, because I know some of you watching this have already lived some version of it yourselves, and some of you are thinking, "Walter, just walk away, don't make a scene." And believe me, some part of me was already turning toward the truck in my mind. But another part of me, the part that had spent 11 sleepless nights convinced my daughter might be dead in a hospital bed somewhere, needed to understand how we'd gotten from "I love you, Dad" to this in the space of one bad week. I found out later that week exactly how. But standing there on that porch, all I had was a dry mouth and a wife quietly falling apart beside me. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. That's not who I am, and it never has been. My own father never stuck around long enough to teach me how to handle a moment like that, so I had to figure it out on my own, the same way I've figured out most things in my life. I reached over, took my wife's trembling hand, and turned us both back toward the truck. Behind us, I heard Marissa mutter something to Renee that I didn't catch, followed by a short, satisfied laugh. I didn't need to hear the words. The tone told me everything. They wanted space. Tomorrow, I decided, I was going to give them more of it than they'd ever imagined asking for. The drive home was the quietest 40 minutes of my life, and I've sat through plenty of quiet in 63 years. Doris stared out the window the whole way, tears running steady and silent down her face, the kind of crying that doesn't make a sound because the person doing it has simply gone somewhere else inside themselves. I'd seen my wife cry at her own mother's funeral, at Renee's wedding, at a dog food commercial once that I still bring up to embarrass her. I had never once seen her cry like that, hollow, like something inside her had quietly stopped running. Somewhere around the county line, she finally spoke. "I bought a blanket," she said quietly. 3 months ago. I've had it wrapped in tissue paper in the hall closet since March. I was going to give it to him the first time we met him. I picked out yellow because we didn't know if it was a boy or girl yet, and I wanted it to be something he'd have forever, something from his grandmother. Her hands were shaking in her lap. I didn't think I'd still be holding it in that closet a week after he was born. What do you say to that? What is there to say? I reached over and held her hand the rest of the way home, and neither of us spoke again until we pulled into our own driveway. 38 years, I've run a diesel shop, fixed engines other men had given up on, and I had never once felt as useless as I did in that truck, unable to fix the one thing that actually mattered. We walked into our house a little after 4 that afternoon, and the quiet inside hit different than it ever had before. 30 years in that house, every Christmas morning, every scraped knee from the driveway, every ordinary Tuesday that used to be full of Renee's voice on the phone telling us some small thing about her day. That afternoon the quiet had teeth in it. Doris made it as far as the living room couch before her legs simply gave out from under her, and she went down onto the cushions and cried the way you cry when someone has died. Not the composed, held together crying she'd done in the truck. The real thing from somewhere underneath her ribs. I sat down beside her and didn't try to fix anything, which anyone who knows me will tell you is close to a miracle, because fixing things is the only language I've ever really spoken fluently. I just held her while she cried into my shoulder, and I let myself ask the question that had been chasing me the whole drive home. Where did we go wrong, Doris? I built that girl a childhood I never had. Never missed a single one of her games. Paid for a wedding neither of us could really afford at the time. Showed up every Sunday to build a nursery for a baby I'm apparently not allowed to meet. Doris lifted her head, eyes red and swollen, and said the only thing that made any sense to me that whole terrible day. You didn't do anything wrong, Walter. You gave her every single thing you never had, and somewhere along the way she forgot that things like that don't come from nowhere. People who never had to earn something rarely know how to be grateful for it. I held my wife on that couch until it got dark outside, and somewhere in that darkness, I made myself a promise. My daughter and her husband had made themselves clear, painfully and deliberately clear, standing in that doorway. Space. No calls. No showing up. Fine. I decided right then I was finally going to honor that request completely, and spend whatever years I had left taking care of the one person who had never once asked me to disappear. We didn't sleep much that night. We really talked, the kind of talking 35 years of marriage lets you do without having to explain half of it first. We agreed on one thing above everything else. Whatever happened from here forward, we would move together. No solo decisions. No one softening at the wrong moment out of guilt while the other one held the line. By sunrise, we were aligned. And Walter Briggs, standing shoulder to shoulder with his wife, is not a man you want standing between you and a phone call to his attorney. I called my lawyer, Harold Pruitt, at 7:30 the next morning. Harold had handled every contract for Briggs Diesel for over 20 years. He knows the difference between my business voice and every other voice I own, and this call was clearly the other kind. Walt, he said, you sound like a man who didn't sleep. I need some things looked at, I told him. College fund I've been putting money into for the grandkids. The truck loan I co-signed for Cole 2 years back when his credit wasn't where it needed to be. And I want to talk about the trust. There was a pause on the line, the kind of pause a good lawyer gives you when he wants to be sure you're not about to make a decision out of anger that you'll regret by lunchtime. You want to talk through it first, or you want me to just start pulling the paperwork? Start pulling it, I said. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Harold didn't push back any further. By that afternoon, he'd confirmed what I already suspected as co-signer on Cole's truck loan. I had every legal right to notify the lender in writing that I was withdrawing my backing on any future payments. It wouldn't call the loan due immediately, but it would flag Cole's account for review, and given that his credit on his own had been shaky enough to need a co-signer in the first place, the bank would very likely demand new collateral or an accelerated payoff schedule within 30 days. As for the college fund, a modest account I'd been quietly feeding $200 a month into since my granddaughter was born, meant to grow into something real. By the time she and her new baby brother were old enough for it to matter, I told Harold to freeze any future contributions and move the existing balance into a separate account entirely. One held only in my name and Doris's, until further notice, not to take it away forever, just to make very clear that it existed because of a relationship, and that relationships require two people showing up. They wanted space. I decided to give them the closest thing to real space that a man in my position could offer. I didn't hear a single word from either of them for 4 days after that, which felt almost funny given everything that had just happened. The same silence that had nearly broken me 2 weeks earlier now felt like the first real rest I'd had in a month. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was under a school bus at the shop, elbow deep in a fuel line, when my phone buzzed against the concrete floor, with Cole's name lighting up the screen. I let it ring twice before I picked up, wiped my hand on a rag, and answered. Walt. His voice came out tight, clipped, a man trying hard to sound calm and mostly failing. The bank just called me. They're saying you pulled your name off the truck loan, and now they want the whole balance restructured or paid off in 30 days. I can't swing that on my own right now, not with a new baby and Renee not back to work yet. That's right, I said, keeping my voice level, almost gentle. I withdrew my backing 4 days ago. Dead silence on the line. Why would you do that? Walt, you know I can't refinance that on my own credit alone right now. You told your mother-in-law and me to stop showing up, I said, to give you space. So we are. Space cuts both ways, son. That's not what we meant, and you know it. I don't think I do know it, I said. I think I know exactly what Renee said, standing in that doorway. And I think I know exactly what it felt like to call 11 times over 11 days and be told I was hovering. Walt, please, you have to call the bank back. Tell them it was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake, Cole. I'll talk to you soon. I hung up. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel much of anything except a strange, settled kind of clarity, the same clarity you feel when you finally diagnose an engine problem that's been rattling at you for weeks, and you realize the fix was never going to be complicated, just uncomfortable. Over the following 2 weeks, Cole scrambled. I heard through Doris, who still texted occasionally with her sister-in-law, that he'd gone to 2 different credit unions trying to refinance on his own income and been turned down both times. Renee, still recovering and now caring for a newborn and a 4-year-old without the truck loan headache resolved, grew short-tempered and exhausted according to the little bits that filtered back to us secondhand. They didn't call to apologize. They called because the math had stopped working. They showed up at our door on a Sunday morning 3 weeks after that porch conversation, and this time they didn't come with balloons or a bright, brittle houseguest standing behind them. They came with my granddaughter in the back seat and a diaper bag, and when Renee got out of the car, she looked like she hadn't slept properly in days. I let them in, sat them down in the same living room where Doris had come apart weeks earlier, and let them say whatever they'd driven 40 minutes to say. Cole went first, and to his credit, he didn't try to dress it up. We're drowning, Walt, he said. The truck payment restructure they're offering is almost double what we were paying. I can't do this without you backing it again. I know we said some things. You said space. I cut in, quiet but steady. I'm giving you space. That's not punishment, Cole. That's honoring exactly what you both asked for. Renee's composure cracked faster than her husband's had. This isn't fair, she said, voice rising, the baby stirring in his carrier at the sudden noise. You're punishing us for asking for some privacy after having a baby. That's not normal, Dad. That's cruel. Was it cruel? I asked, and I kept my voice entirely even, entirely without heat, when your mother and I called 11 times over 11 days because we genuinely believed something terrible had happened to you. Was it cruel when we stood on your porch and asked to meet your son, and you told us to come back another time? I have never once, in 63 years, learned how to stop worrying about my children. I flew well. I drove 40 minutes straight into a doorway where I was told I was hovering. Now the bank is teaching you a different lesson than the one you were trying to teach me. Renee's face shifted, grief curdling fast into something sharper. You're doing this to control us, she said. You've always done this. You can't stand that we're a family without needing you in every decision. I don't need to be in every decision, I said. But you told me not to call, not to show up, to let you handle your own family. I'm honoring that. If you truly don't need me hovering, then you don't need my name on your truck loan, And you don't need a college fund. I'm quietly funding out of my own account either. That's not revenge, sweetheart. That's you getting exactly what you asked for. Doris, who had been standing quietly in the kitchen doorway through all of this, stepped forward then, her voice steadier than I'd heard it in weeks. Your father and I talked about every single decision together, she said. We are completely on the same page. We love you both. And we love those babies more than either of you will understand until you're old and gray yourselves. But we are done being treated like an inconvenience you tolerate on your own schedule. My granddaughter, sitting on the floor with a stuffed rabbit, looked up at the sudden quiet in the room, and something about her small, uncertain face, standing in the middle of all that grown-up wreckage, nearly undid every ounce of resolve I'd built over the last 3 weeks. Nearly. Renee cried on our couch for the better part of an hour that morning. Real tears, I believe, though I've learned that real tears don't automatically mean real understanding. I listened to every word of it, the exhaustion, the fear about the loan, the accusation that we were bitter old people who couldn't let go. I felt something steady and quiet settle into my chest instead of tearing through it, the way it had 3 weeks earlier. They left that afternoon without a resolution, without me picking the phone back up to call the bank, without Doris and me suddenly deciding the college fund needed to go back to where it had been. We hugged our granddaughter tight at the door, and Doris slipped that yellow blanket finally into the diaper bag before they drove off, because some love doesn't need to be conditional even when the rest of it has to be. I went to see Harold again the following week, and this time it wasn't about loans or bank accounts. I want to revise the trust, I told him, sliding my coffee aside to make room for the folder he'd brought. Not out of spite, out of clarity. He looked at me over his glasses, the same careful look he'd given me the morning I called about the truck loan. How much revising are we talking, Walt? If I go first, everything goes to Doris, I said. If she goes first, it comes to me. And when we're both gone, the grandchildren, both of them, everyone that comes after, get an education trust they cannot touch until they're 25, held separately, managed by you, not handed directly to their parents to spend as they see fit. And a portion, a real portion, goes to the trade school scholarship fund I've quietly supported for years, for kids from single-parent homes who never had a father around to teach them a trade the way nobody ever taught me. Harold didn't ask me to reconsider. He just nodded, made his notes, and got to work. My own father left before I was old enough to remember his face clearly. I spent 63 years trying to be the man he never stayed around long enough to become for me, and somewhere in giving my daughter every comfort I never had, I apparently also gave her the idea that comfort simply appears, that it doesn't come from a man getting up at 5 every morning for 38 straight years. Months passed. The calls from Renee and Cole slowed to something manageable, then found a new, quieter rhythm, not the constant checking in of before, and not the 11 days of silence either. Somewhere in the middle, which I've come to understand is probably where most real relationships actually live. The truck loan got restructured on Cole's own credit, tighter and more expensive than it needed to be, but his. The college fund stayed exactly where I'd moved it, growing quietly for 2 children who will someday, I hope, understand exactly why it was there and why it briefly wasn't. I still see my granddaughter every other Saturday. I've met my grandson 3 times now, held him twice, and each time Renee has been a little softer, a little more like the girl who used to run to the door when I came home covered in grease. We're not fixed. I don't know if fixed is even the right word for what a family becomes after something like this. But we're honest now, in a way we weren't before, and honest has turned out to be worth more to me at 63 than comfortable ever was. Doris and I sit out on our back porch most evenings now, coffee in hand, watching the Oklahoma sky do its slow orange fade over the same yard where Renee learned to ride a bike. I stayed up half the night putting together. She reached over one evening not too long ago and put her hand over mine, the way she's done 10,000 times across 35 years, and I looked at her and understood something plain and true. My father walked out before I turned 9, and I spent my whole life making sure my own children would never once wait on a curb for anybody. But somewhere along the way, I nearly forgot that the woman sitting beside me on this porch had been waiting her whole life too, not on a curb, but right here, for me to finally see that she was the one who'd never once needed convincing to show up. My daughter has her own family now, her own life, exactly the space she asked for. And my wife and I, we have each other, steady as we've always been. That, it turns out, is more than enough to build the rest of my years on. If this one hit close to home for you, tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one. Hit that like button, subscribe if you're new around here, and I'll see you in the next story.